Cheers. Okay guys, welcome to the video. So today I've got a really kind of interesting video. I'm going to basically be walking you through all the steps I take to get a model prepared for rendering. Now if you're new to my channel, my name's Jake. I've got a degree in product design and I work full-time as a freelance designer. This is actually not my model. This is a famous YouTuber named Steve Booker. He's a really cool YouTuber. He makes amazing content. He's a photographer. He does an all-round amazing job of producing cool stuff, basically. Now, I noticed Steve was actually using SketchUp on his Instagram story, so I slid into his DMs and said, Steve, send that my way, I'll get some renders to you. So I basically go through the model, fix any issues that, you know, a lot of beginners make actually. There's a lot of issues in there that hopefully you can learn from, and you can maybe make those corrections before you build any interior models. This is Steve's first model within SketchUp, and he's done a really good job. Once I go through the model, I'll then prepare it for rendering. So this will involve me applying materials to surfaces and actually creating some of my own materials in Vray. And then we produce some renders. Now these renders, I did a few of those isometric renders, which you might have seen in my previous video. So we did a few of those, which turned out pretty professional looking and pretty cool looking. And then we do some more standard renders that you'd get, you know, in kind of a render package that you might send to a client. So basically I go through all of that process in this video. I'll show you the final renders and the final package that I made for Steve towards the end of the video. But hopefully you can gain some tips from it and some tricks from it if you're a SketchUp user or a Vray user. As always, I have all my classes on SkillShare as well, so if you want to learn some more in-depth tutorials on SketchUp and Vray, I have classes there. But other than that, I'm going to throw it to me on the desktop now and begin the video. Hopefully enjoy it, and I'll see you soon. So, this is Steve's office, and initially when I opened it, we had kind of like a more traditional style applied to the scene itself. And normally that's fine, but as you can see, it's really laggy. Now this is because there's a lot of geometry within this model. So when you're importing stuff from the 3D warehouse, a lot of the time it's built, not inefficiently, but it's built with tons of geometry, especially when it comes to like things like plants, and this Mac has loads of geometry in it. So this can really slow down your model when you're moving around the model. So what I like to do is just come down to one of these fast model styles, so shaded with textures is good. There's a few other ones here, like shaded basically gets rid of all your textures, just has the shaded colors, and you can see we can move around a lot quicker. But I like shaded with textures because you obviously want to see the textures applied to your materials. So that's just the first little tip, and you can always tell when they're fast modeling styles, they've got this little kind of green timer next to them. That means they're going to work a bit quicker on your computer. Initially though, Steve's made a really good office. He's basically done what you're supposed to do when it comes to interiors. You want to put all the details you can within it. So Steve's basically added all of these little trinkets that are related to him and he probably owns in some facet. We've got tons of planting, which is always good in my book. Planting always makes interiors look more livable and more homely, especially in SketchUp. So he's done very well at that. We've got, what is this little, not sure what that is. It's like a little bike tracker. Oh, right, okay, it is a bike tracker. So look, he's got his kind of Peloton setup. I don't know what that would be called there. It's got a TV, I'm guessing to do some like kind of digital rides, which is cool. Got a lot of planting again, like I said, got all his cameras and stuff like that. So this is really good. This is really good foundation for an interior. We've got all this nice shelving here that he's probably built himself. Got some New Balances down here. Got a DJI, looks like a DJI. Big camera, big lenses. All good. What's down here? Is that a little guillotine? Cutting paper? Cutting mat? So overall, this model is great. For his first model, it's top notch. Now, only when I click on things, we can see there's a few little issues. So first off, when I click on these walls, we can see they're all one solid object. So there's no flexibility in terms of if we wanted to hide one of the walls, we can't do that because they're actually all attached. And if I triple click, you can see what is attached to this object. And unfortunately, we've got the desk, which is fully attached. The floor is also fully attached. And yeah, some desks here and this shelf is. This is a common mistake that a lot of people do when they first start using SketchUp, is they just start building geometry off other geometry. And what you want to be doing is thinking about objects as you would in real life and how they're basically separate. So a good example of this is these shelves. So these shelves are obviously separate to your wall in real life. If I double click on them, we can see, or we can actually see they're not attached. So that's good. That means we can kind of fix this problem quite easily. But if Steve were to attach them, and then if he wanted to move them, he would have a lot of problems because it would start messing with the wall geometry. I'm going to undo that quickly. But what we can do is we can just, if we just triple click this, we can select all of the faces. And then if I press Ctrl G on my keyboard, that will group it. So now that means when we want to move this around, so if we want to rotate it or move it to another position, it's not going to interfere with our wall space, which is ideal basically when you want to create a room. On the other side of that, when it is attached and it's not grouped, you'll run into issues where, okay, I want to move this shelf up by, say, 10 centimeters. If I double click on this, I'm now selecting the whole, basically all of our walls because they're attached to it. So say if I wanted to move this shelf, I would have to, it would be quite tricky actually. But if I grab this, I could move it like this. I could manually move it by moving the faces, but that is not ideal. Say if I wanted to move it to a different wall, that would be very difficult to do. That kind of highlights some of the problems that a lot of beginners will face actually. It is building things without grouping them, and that's probably the #1 tip I'd give people at the moment when it comes to learning SketchUp. And I know it's 2022 and a lot of people are trying to get into 3D modeling, and you can do this within your browser as well. Like SketchUp has SketchUp Free, which is within your browser, so you can use that if you want. And I've actually got lessons on my SkillShare page entirely dedicated to SketchUp Free, which I recommend if you want to learn that. Now I've grouped that, I can basically get rid of these shelves because they are actually not groups. So I can triple click them and delete them. And what I'm going to do is just copy this shelf that I've made its own group, and I'm going to stick to the blue axis. So that's pressing up on my keyboard. And I'm just going to snap to the bottom of the books here. And then I can do the same for the other shelf. Press Control on my keyboard to copy it. Hit on the blue axis and then paste it like that. Now, because these are all groups, I can then actually move them to our wall, which is what we want to do. So that kind of highlights the problem of grouping. So we've kind of resolved that. Next, I'm going to try and focus on the walls because I know Steve wanted some of these orthographic kind of views that I've been creating lately, and they look really cool. But in order to do that, we're going to need to hide some of the walls. So that'll be our next stage in this process. So what I want to do here is basically break up the walls into their 4 separate walls, and then I'm going to put them into groups so that we can hide and unhide them pretty easily. That way we can be more flexible in how we render. We can render at different sides, we can make walls disappear and reappear basically. At the moment, this wall and this kind of like skirting bit is attached, so we still have that issue of everything being attached. But I have a solution to this problem, and the solution is that we're going to basically rebuild the walls. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to complete this kind of wall section here, so we can create a new wall. And then what I'm going to do here is just double click this face and then Control C, which means copy, and I'll Control V it down here. First thing I want to do is group it, Control G. And then what I can do, I can use the push pull tool and match our existing wall height that we want to achieve, like that. So we've kind of got a wall, but we need to put in our door space. So to do that, I can do that quite quickly. And a bit of a trick really, you just draw a rectangle, doesn't have to be perfect, the perfect size, and then we can use the push pull tool to actually line up with these references here. So if I push that outer edge, I'll line up to there, and then if I push this other edge and line it up to there, like that, then I can do the same for this top edge, like so. So I have a wall and it's a separate group now, which is ideal. The next thing I'm going to try and replicate is this kind of like skirting detail. I don't know what you call this, kind of like molding, I'm not really sure. And to do that, I'm basically going to use the same principle. I'm going to connect up the lines at the point in which we want to break it. So we want to break it here. And then I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it and then straight away I'm going to group it like that. We now have our group, and then what I can do is I can basically line it up with the point on which we want it to be, so here, and then I can move it along the red axis, and then I can intercept this point. Oh no, I can't actually, not quite there actually, it's more like that, there you go. And then I can then go into this group by double clicking, and what I'll do is I'll just pull that down and match that point here. Boom, like that. That's it, now we've got two groups. We've got our kind of edging detail, and then we've got the wall itself. And then if I just select them both and then Control G on the keyboard again, we'll make that one whole group. Now we have a wall. The next stage will be to remove this wall, and now this might be a little bit tricky, but what I tend to do first, I'll probably get rid of this molding. If I push pull it, it should kind of disappear, and then hopefully I can get rid of this. This is what happens in SketchUp. It kind of stops at every junction, so this spot is stopping here. So if I bring this down that point, and then also if I just delete these lines, it should help us. I mean, you could manually delete each line, but that would just be a bit long. So sometimes I like to use the tools to delete things, essentially. Push pull that down now. Oh, we're still limited to this point for some reason. And there we go. Our wall has now disappeared. We've got some strange lines here, but we can get rid of them. Like that. And then we can probably just get rid of these lines as well. We don't need these anymore. Cool, now if I bring my wall back into place, just snap and everything should line up. Just double check the skirting bit lines up. Yep. Everything looks good. And now what we can do is we can basically right click this and hide it. And we now have a hidden wall, which is great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same on this wall, and I'll just time lapse that, so we'll speed through that. And then we'll start applying some textures using Vray and making a few little changes here and there. But it's going to be good. It's going to be real good. So now I have all the walls as separate entities, meaning I can hide them and unhide them as I wish, which is great. So now our model is like pretty diverse in the fact that, yeah, we can get different points of view. We can basically just play around with it. But you saw in the time lapse, it was a bit fiddly, especially that kind of this kind of window area, this bay area was a bit fiddly. So I actually copied the whole thing over, and then you saw me delete the existing wall. So that was probably the easiest, quickest method to do that. The thing about SketchUp, it's all about thinking how can you produce the result as quickly as possible, yeah, as effectively as possible, I guess, really. That's all our walls. So if I unhide them now, you'll see that we're back basically where we started, but we have a much more versatile model. So the next thing I'll do is I'll probably actually make the desks a separate entity, because they're actually still attached to the floor, which is not ideal. So I'll do that using the same method, and you'll see that in this kind of time lapse. So yeah, I just sorted out the desks. So they're both separate entities now, which is great. And then I also adjusted the shelves. So now the shelves are also separate entities, which is good for when we want to apply textures. And one thing I did do is I made them components. So that means when I apply a change to one of them, they all change. So you'll see if I now want to make this shelf shorter, you see that all the shelves that are the same item have changed. That's just another little tip. Components mean that an item is a component, so a change you make to one of them will affect all of the copies of it. That's that done. The next thing I will do, and I probably won't time lapse this, but I'm just going to build the windows. Steve just sent me a photo of his windows, so I'm going to add them in for him. And then we're going to start getting into V-Ray and we're going to start making it look awesome. So I've got our windows in place now, and I also added a bit of skirting or skirting board. I don't know what people call it around the world, but it's this kind of like edging that goes around the perimeter of the room. And I've also moved every like item that's touching the skirting, just moved it off the skirting a little bit, so like this desk was touching the wall, but now it's not, which is cool. And yeah, so now it's ready to start adding textures. So I'm going to open up V-Ray and we can begin. The first thing I'm going to tackle is the plywood texture. Now this is basically the texture that's going throughout this interior. So the desks, the shelves, they're all going to be made out of birch ply, 18mm thick. So I'm going to start by producing a really cool texture for that, and we're going to use some of the V-Ray materials and then have a little play and edit, and it's going to look awesome. We can basically see that there's tons of materials already in this model, and that's basically because importing from the 3D warehouse, anytime you import an asset, it's going to have materials applied to it, and then they will therefore be in your materials when you open up V-Ray or any other rendering program. You know, a lot of these are probably pretty junk materials in terms of they don't have any like properties like reflection or opacity or bump. But sometimes you import a model and it actually does have V-Ray textures applied, which is really useful. What I'm going to do in this case is Steve wanted to use birch plywood for his desk and his shelvings. So I'm basically going to show you how I can just add that. And then what I'll do after that is I'll just go through the model myself and I'll replace all the materials with basically better materials, and then we can start running renders and it will start looking realistic and really good. The first thing I'm going to do is actually remove the material on this existing desk. So if I right click it, come down to UV tools and then remove materials. Now sometimes when you try and apply the material this way, it can get a little bit buggy, but it does say I have plywood already. So if I just click on that now, okay, it has applied it. Now the scale is too small at the moment and it suggests 50 centimeters, but that's basically 500mm. So I'll type that in, hopefully we'll see it reflect in the texture. Yeah, it's increased it a bit, but I think it could actually probably be a bit bigger. The grain still seems a bit tight. So I'm going to change the size of it to about 1000 probably. I think that might look more plywoody. Oh, maybe that's a bit big actually. So yeah, 1000 might be a little bit too big. Let's just do probably 800 actually. I think 800 might be the best. So that's pretty good. So we can always adjust that moving forward. But what I can then do is then just apply this material to our shelves. So these also have the materials on them. So if I just select these three, and then if I just remove the materials from these and use my bucket tool, I can just apply the plywood. These particular shelves are components. So if I remove the materials from this one, they should be removed from all of them. And then if I apply the material to this one, I actually would need to go into the group for this. But if I apply this material, it will apply it to all of our shelves like that. It's pretty good. Now we're going to do the same for this area. Cool. I might just change this plywood so it is the same type of wood. So hopefully we can just... So now at least those plywoods will have the same kind of colour and texture and feel as the rest of the room. Now the thing about plywood is there's normally an edge, and the V-Ray texture doesn't show the plywood edge, which you'd get. So what I'm going to do there is I'm actually going to create my own material and then apply it, and I'll show you the results in a second. Okay, so now I've basically gone through the whole model and applied textures from the V-Ray texture library. So in terms of like this Mac, it now has an aluminium finish that when we render it, it will actually look like real aluminium instead of the old texture that was just on it when it was imported from the 3D warehouse. I also added that kind of edge texture for the plywood. So now all of our plywood surfaces have the kind of plywood edge, and I've matched them up. So it basically looks how it would when it is going to be built, this kind of unit here. I've done the same on this area and these this kind of little desk area as well. Now it's basically ready to render, and I've actually set up one of the views. Now one of them was going to be this kind of orthographic style, and this is one of the ones that I sent Steve and he really liked it. So I've basically set up my camera and actually created a scene. So here's one of the scenes. Now I can just hide these. These are some kind of external like bushes for outside the window. So you'll get to see some of the leaves and stuff from the bushes when we do a render looking through the windows. This is one of the viewpoints that we're going to be using, and this basically is using a very low field of view. So if you go into camera and come into field of view, you'll see that my field of view is actually at 10 degrees. Normally when you open SketchUp it's about 54 or sometimes 45, and that's giving you like a more realistic perspective, but this is kind of pulling back and giving that kind of orthographic look that I think looks really cool. So from here I can run a render and I'll show you what it looks like. So I've now run a render of that view and this is kind of the result we get. I think it looks really cool. A few things I did was I added an infinite plane underneath it, so that's basically creating a floor. And then what I've done is I've just raised the office above that kind of floor by about 10 centimeters or so, and that just gives it a nice shadow underneath it, and you can see it's kind of elevated. A few other things were like playing around with the lighting, and there's a lot of different tweaks you can do with the lighting, but I've kind of got a way of doing it which makes it kind of look organic and give it a nice realistic look in this kind of, obviously this kind of unrealistic viewpoint. I added some more details as well. I actually added Steve's YouTube channel to the Mac, which I think's a nice little detail. And there's a few other things that I added texture wise. I changed his floor as well, so now we've got a more realistic floor, and I actually put one of his photos within this photo frame because I thought the existing art was a bit rubbish, to be honest. I actually have a more in-depth video on how to set up these isometric renders in Vray and SketchUp, and that will be linked in that top little bit of this video. It should pop up hopefully, but there's a full in-depth video on how to kind of do this and create this effect, because I have kind of brushed over it a little bit. I do understand that. So yeah, check that out if you want to do this and want a bit more detail about how to. That's about it in terms of that view, and that's going to be one of the isometric views. And what I will do is I'll rotate it and do the opposite side, and then I'm going to actually create some more renders without this extreme point of view. That'll be more realistic, like you were taking a photo of an interior. And what I'll do from there is then put it into a document and send it over to Steve. So this is going to be one of the views that I want to render out. I've basically set up another scene for this. So I've positioned my camera. I've changed out of that really small depth of field, so that on the camera settings, you go, field of view, it was at 10, now it's at 48. So this is going to be a more standard depth of field. Field of view. I've got to stop mixing them two up. So what I normally do for my render settings is I'll render them at high. My render output, I'm actually going to do these at square, and because I'm going to be putting them on quite a small document, I'm only going to do them at 1080. I might actually increase it if I'm not happy with it. I might increase the size to maybe 1920. And I've set the ratio to square, so it's 1:1. Standard is probably widescreen at 16:9, but I wanted to make some nice little square images for the document, so I thought a square would be cool. So the one thing that I always recommend is turning on your depth of field. So within the camera settings, if you go to depth of field, make sure that's turned on. And here is where you pick your focus point. So I like to pick a point kind of in the middle of the scene or something that I want to focus on. So for me, it will probably be the middle of this desk or kind of the middle of the screen. So if I just click on that, and it will take a second to load because it's quite a big model, so it takes a bit of time to process that. What that does is that creates that nice blur effect, and it creates a focal point for the camera, because remember, when you render, you have to treat it like you're a photographer. So you want to basically find some cool positions and angles that can really highlight the design and the interest within your scene. So that's really important to think about. So my defocus here is at 347. So what that means is when I actually render here, you'll see that these plants will be slightly out of focus, and along with this kind of area will be slightly out of focus, and you can always adjust it. I might actually put it up. I'll make it a little bit higher just to show you a more extreme version of it, but it will give you understanding of how we use depth of field to make really good renders, because without them they look very flat and they don't look as professional. So I'm going to run this render and I'll show you the results in a second. Okay, so that render's just finished and you can see what it looks like here. Now that depth of field has, you know, produced a really cool result. We've got, like I said, that out of focus here in the foreground, so this plant is obviously out of focus, and in the background we've got a bit of that defocus there as well. So our main focal point was kind of the middle of the screen, and you can see that we are focused there, so this kind of wood is in focus. Everything else is looking pretty good. I probably will let a bit more light in. I actually put a ceiling on there temporarily, so I might actually take that off to let a bit more light in. And we can also, if we open the side panel, we can mess with the exposure a little bit, so I could up the exposure ever so slightly. So I've actually added a layer there. So that's create a layer and then added an exposure layer. So actually that's probably a bit better, to be honest, up the exposure a little bit. Also I've got lens effects on, so these are going to give you that kind of bloom and lens effects. They're not really taking effect on this render. But you can see all the textures that I've placed, they look really good. So the aluminium here looks really nice. The wood looked really good. This plywood's looking really good, I think. So there was a few like problems with the model. So ideally this chair would be a better model, but I didn't really have time to make a whole chair, so it's not the best, but we're just going to stick with it. So yeah, I think it looks good. I think there's a lot of really good aspects to this. This is one of the renders that I'll be doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the rest of the renders, and I'll jump back in a sec and show you the results in the final document. So I spent a bit of time building this document for Steve. So this is it. This is the opening page. I exported a kind of line render. I like to do this sometimes. I like to just mix the styles up in SketchUp. So this is just going to be a line render exported. There's a few bits of geometry missing, but I think it looks kind of cool. It's like, I normally put this on the front of my documents that I send to clients, just to give like a little taster of what's to come. So our first render is one of these isometric shots. I think looks really good. So this is coming into the room. So this is the left-hand side, I guess. And the next shot is that right-hand side render, which I showed you earlier, which I think looks really good. We got some, really nice details in here. We got the windows are in place. We've got light coming through. I also added one of these cycling games that I think people use with their Peloton / rider setups, which I think is cool. The mirror is in place. The aluminium is looking good. Added some texture to these lights as well. I think overall looks really nice. So this is that other viewpoint. Seeing all the details here. I actually do put a bit of defocus on these renders as well, because I think it looks kind of cool. It adds another dimension to it. So we are focused on the screen here, but you obviously can't see, this is not the full res image. The full res image does kind of show a bit more detail. So here's left and right together. Nice little pairing. And I also did some of those, more realistic renders, some more normal renders. So here's just kind of like a front profile of the desk that he's going to be building. Get an idea of the space. Nice little top-down view here, and here you can see some of that planting coming in through the window, which is cool. Everything else is looking pretty good. Another kind of top-down view. Again, just trying to set up angles that look good. That's always so important with renders. So these are some of those square shots which I was talking about. Again, another detail on the bench, so you can see some of the detail in the grain, the edging. It all looks really nice. That shot from earlier, so it's slightly different, add a bit more light. But again, I think it looks really nice. Shot of that kind of side area. Another shot of these details with the lighting. There's a bit of that bloom happening there, so that's having the camera lens effects turned on in Vray. You get a bit of this kind of bloom going on, which is nice, and lens flare almost. A nice defocus shot here. I just wanted to focus on kind of the end grain of the desk area. So we've got a bit of focus here, and I've just cranked it up a little bit more than I would normally, but I think it gives a cool effect. And then a good detailed shot of the kind of trinkets he has on his shelving. And then finally, I thought actually he's going to be sitting at the desk for quite a lot of the time, so let's give him a shot of what it would look like sitting on the desk. So I actually increased the field of view here, so it's kind of a bit more of a fisheye look. But I think it gives a really good perspective of what it's going to look like sitting at your desk. So you can see all the stuff in the background. So I'm happy with that. And then I just had a little end page. that's it. That's kind of the full document that I've just sent to Steve. So hopefully he likes it, and yeah, he enjoys the work that we've created here. So that about wraps up this video. I hope it was helpful and useful to any designers out there using SketchUp. Now, I have a load of in-depth classes on my Skillshare page, and I actually have a Skillshare lesson on building a home office. So I walk you through all the steps, including like measuring up your office and then getting it into 3D. So if you're interested in that, I'll put that in the links below. Also, I've got loads of lessons for beginners on there. So classes for beginners, I've got a SketchUp free lesson, which is all within your browser. So you don't actually have to download or buy SketchUp. You can basically just sign into the website and you can use SketchUp free. So I'll put that in the links below as well. It's a very good class. At the moment, Skillshare are still running that 1 month free if you use my link. So if you use any of my links, that will give you 1 month free of Skillshare, which is really cool. So they're still doing that at the moment. So take advantage of it, because I think they're actually going to get rid of that soon. And also, it really supports me and helps me out grow on Skillshare and YouTube. So if you want to support me, that would be awesome. Also, don't forget to check out Steve's channel. I think he's going to be doing a video revolving around this subject, so I might be in it in some aspect, which would be cool. So check out Steve's channel as well. Other than that, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you could subscribe to my channel, I'm kind of just getting started on YouTube. I've kind of moved from Skillshare to YouTube. If you could subscribe, that would really help me out. I'm trying to put out content pretty regularly, so every week I should have a video, something related to SketchUp or 3D design or design in general actually. So I really hope you managed to take something from this video, whether it was something to do with 3D design in SketchUp or Vray or setting up renders or even office design actually. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. So I'll catch you then. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.